Renee had a talent for saying cruel things quietly enough to sound accidental. Vivian watched her sister corner Daniel near the kitchen doorway at Sunday dinner, one hand resting on his arm in a way that looked casual to anyone not paying attention. "You can do so much better than the family disappointment," Renee said, smiling like she'd offered him a compliment instead of a verdict. Across the table, their mother, Marguerite, smiled into her wineglass and said nothing. Vivian didn't ask what she meant by disappointment. She already knew. It was the label the family had quietly assigned her years ago, back when she started spending her evenings buried in vendor contracts instead of attending the dinners where Renee held court. Nobody had ever called it what it actually was: the sound of someone doing the unglamorous work of holding a family's legacy together while getting none of the credit for it. Vivian stood, collected her coat, and left without a word. Daniel followed a moment later, quiet the entire drive home, his hand resting on hers at the stoplights without needing to say anything to understand what happened that night. You have to understand what Vivian had actually been carrying for the better part of a decade. When their father's health began declining, someone needed to step in and manage the hotel and the land that had been in the family for 2 generations. Vivian was the one who learned the vendor contracts, renegotiated the hotel's financing, and quietly kept the entire operation from collapsing during a rough stretch nobody outside the family ever heard about. Renee attended the occasional board meeting, said the right things to the right people, and somehow walked away from each one being described as the bright one, while Vivian's actual work disappeared into the background, expected rather than noticed. That night, at her kitchen table, Vivian opened her laptop and found the email she'd been avoiding for 4 months. Her father's estate attorney had sent over trust restructuring documents back in the spring, quietly suggesting it was time to formalize what had already been informally true for years: that Vivian, not the family as a loosely coordinated group, should hold clear discretionary authority over the hotel, the land, and the liquid trust assets tied to both. She'd read the documents back then and closed the laptop, uneasy. It felt like taking something, like proving Renee's accusation right instead of wrong. Sitting there now, still in her coat from dinner, she understood something she hadn't let herself understand before. She wasn't protecting the family by delaying this. She was protecting people who had spent years describing her as a disappointment while quietly relying on her to keep everything from falling apart. She signed the documents just after 10 that evening. By 11, her phone had started buzzing. By midnight, she'd stopped counting the missed calls, though later she would know the number exactly: 68. Somewhere around 12:30, headlights swept across her driveway, and she heard car doors, then her mother's voice, then Renee's, sharper, already accusatory before either of them had said a full sentence. Vivian opened the door before they could knock. "What did you do?" Renee asked, not as a question so much as an accusation dressed up as one. "I finished paperwork Dad's attorney sent me in the spring," Vivian said, calm. Not performing calm, actually calm. The way people are when they've already made peace with a decision before anyone else finds out about it. It puts the hotel, the land, and the trust's liquid assets under a structure I have discretionary authority over. It doesn't take anything away from either of you. It just means the informal loans, the impulsive withdrawals, the last-minute "can you just handle it" requests, those go through a real process now. Marguerite's face shifted through several things at once, landing somewhere between defensive and, underneath that, something closer to shame. "You could have talked to us." "I tried for years," Vivian said. "Every time I brought up how things were being run, it turned into a conversation about how ungrateful I sounded for a job nobody else wanted." She paused. "Dad wanted this in place over a year ago. He was worried about exactly this, a night like tonight, where something small turns into a fight about who deserves what. I didn't sign it because I didn't want to prove Renee right about me. Tonight I realized I already had, by waiting." Renee didn't say anything for a long moment, her earlier certainty visibly draining out of her. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its edge. "I didn't think you actually did that much." "I know," Vivian said. Not bitter. Just honest. That was kind of the problem. They stood on the porch a while longer, the conversation slower and more careful than any they'd had in years. Marguerite finally said quietly that she'd let the favoritism go unspoken for too long, because naming it meant admitting she'd played a part in it. Renee didn't offer a polished apology. She just sat on the porch step, uncomfortable in a way that seemed, for the first time, genuine. Vivian didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She'd spent 10 years being the invisible reason things worked, and for the first time she let herself be seen, not as the family's disappointment, and not as its hero either, just as the person who had finally decided her own worth didn't require anyone else's permission to exist.